Our Caribbean economies are largely reliant on imports. Just go to the supermarket or visit the mall or the hardware shop or the electronics store, and you will see that most of the things there are not produced in this region. Many of those commodities are either purchased directly from the United States of America or pass through the United States of America on their way to the Caribbean region. That, my friends, is a legacy of our colonial dependence. Together with colleague heads of state and heads of government, we have been working to diversify ourselves away from this dependence.
Hey, Breakdown family. So we've been talking about Trump's new tariffs and how they're shaking up the global economy. But today we're zooming in on a region that rarely makes the headlines, but is feeling the impact just as much, if not more, than anyone else. The Caribbean. Small island nations, import-heavy economies, and now caught in the crossfire of a global trade war they didn't start, but are absolutely going to feel. Last week, Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados and Chair of CARICOM, stepped up to the mic and said what needed to be said, delivering a powerful speech that says, "This isn't a drill. This is a wake-up call. The world is in crisis and the Caribbean is in it, not beside it." But she didn't stop at warnings. She challenged the region and the world to rethink old relationships, to rediscover economic self-reliance, and to finally explore what's long been overdue: real trade between Africa and the Caribbean. Because this moment, it's more than pressure. It might just be the push we need to build something stronger together. So today on The Breakdown, we're unpacking the impact of Trump's tariffs on the Caribbean, how Prime Minister of Barbados, Mottley, is responding on behalf of the region, and what this moment could mean for the future of global Black trade. That's right. But before we dive in, I want to invite you to be a part of something bigger. Because here at Pan-Genius TV, we're building a space for global Black stories that are told with truth, with care, and with power. And if this matters to you, and I hope it does, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and consider joining our membership or dropping a super thanks to support this work. All right, so before we listen to what Prime Minister Mottley said in her speech, I want us to zoom out for a second and give this some context. When Trump stood at that podium on April 2nd and declared a national economic emergency, the headline was very simple. We're putting a 10% tariff on every single import into the United States. No exceptions. That alone sent shockwaves through the global markets. But here's what didn't make the headlines right away. Some countries are getting hit even harder. Much harder. Let's talk numbers. Most nations, Caribbean countries included, were slapped with the baseline 10% universal tariff. But a select group of countries got singled out with steeper rates. In the Caribbean, Guyana got slapped with a whopping 38%. So why is Guyana, a CARICOM member, on that list? Well, according to Trump, it's about what he calls unfair competitive advantage and concerns about new oil wealth not flowing through American channels. But whatever the justification, the impact is the same. Guyana just became one of the most expensive places to trade with in the Western Hemisphere. And the rest of the Caribbean, even at the standard 10%, the effect is still major, right? Because remember, the Caribbean doesn't just import from the US. It imports from China, Vietnam, Europe, and most of these goods, they pass through the US before reaching their shores. Now, with added tariffs on those global partners, plus a proposed $1 to $1.5 million levy on all Chinese-built cargo ships entering the U.S., that's a logistical nightmare. Shipping costs will go up, delays increase, the price of everything, from the box of rice to the solar panel to school textbook, is going up. And here's the thing. Most Caribbean economies have zero control over these shifts. They're literally stuck right in the middle. So when we talk about who's getting hit the hardest, yes, China and the EU are feeling the pressure, but small import-reliant countries like Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, are absorbing the ripple effects without any of the leverage. And the average person may not feel it today, but by next month, when food prices creep up, when your favorite appliance is delayed, when your cousin's hotel job gets cut back, that's when the trade war gets real. So the question now is, what are Caribbean leaders doing about this? Well, last week, Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, delivered a speech. She didn't only speak for Barbados, but also on behalf of CARICOM, where she serves as the chairwoman. Now, CARICOM is the intergovernmental organization of 15 member states and 5 associate members in the Americas, Caribbean, and Atlantic Ocean, which was set up to promote economic integration and cooperation. Mottley didn't come with vague diplomacy, no. She came with fire and clarity. Here's how she opened.
Since the majority of our members gained their independence, indeed, it is the most difficult period our world has faced since the end of World War II, 80 years ago. Our planet faces a climate catastrophe that worsens every year. We have a cost of living crisis that has been bedeviling us since the disruption of supply chains when the COVID-19 pandemic triggered the shutdown of the majority of countries. Misinformation, disinformation, and manipulation are running rampant. The mental health crisis is causing hopelessness among many of our young people. And regrettably, crime and fear is on the rise. We're fighting wars in the Holy Land, in Europe, and in Africa. Countries are distrustful of countries, and neighbors are distrustful of neighbors. The international order and the international system, my friends, is in grave danger of collapse.
She didn't bury the lead. She called it what it is, a global system in chaos. And then she dropped the part that Caribbean folks need to hear.
And now, we are on the precipice of a global trade war. Our Caribbean economies are largely reliant on imports. Just go to the supermarket or visit the mall or the hardware shop or the electronics store, and you will see that most of the things there are not produced in this region. Many of those commodities are either purchased directly from the United States of America or pass through the United States of America on their way to the Caribbean region. That, my friends, is a legacy of our colonial dependence.
Let's stop right there. That one sentence speaks volumes. Because what she's really saying is this: independence didn't automatically mean sovereignty for the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, and in much of Africa too, what we often call global trade is actually a modern version of an old system. Export what you don't consume and import what you need to survive. So food is imported, clothing imported, electronics definitely imported. Even raw materials exported from these regions get processed abroad and sold back at a premium. It's not just inefficient, it's systemic vulnerability. And here's the catch. Many of these goods don't just come from the US. They pass through it, the ports, the shipping networks, the customs systems, all centralized in places like Miami or Houston. Which means when Trump slaps a tariff on a port levy, Caribbean nations pay for it, even if the product wasn't American. That's how deep this dependency runs. Now let's zoom out, because this isn't just a Caribbean story, right? It's the same story playing out across Africa. Much of Nigerian oil is refined in Europe. Ghanaian cocoa is turned into Swiss chocolate. Zambian copper is shipped to China, refined, then sold back at a higher price. These aren't coincidences. They are the consequences of trade systems that were built under colonial rule and left largely intact after independence. So when Mottley says this is a legacy of colonialism, she's not reaching. She's stating the uncomfortable truth. Many post-colonial economies were never designed to trade with themselves. They were designed to serve someone else. And now that system is cracking because the US is no longer interested in playing global supplier. They want reshoring, rebalancing. Hey, America first. The question is, what happens to regions that are still dependent on systems they don't control? Let's keep watching.
Together with colleague heads of state and heads of government, we have been working to diversify ourselves away from this dependence. We've already started to reap some successes, especially in the field of agriculture, for example, but we still have a long way to go. As we do this work, we have to be mindful that those recent announcements that have been made in the last few days will impact us very directly as a region and as a Caribbean people. We are working and will continue to work to become more self-sufficient. But I want every Caribbean man and every Caribbean woman to hear me. This trade war and the possibility of a $1 million to $1.5 million US levy on all Chinese-made ships entering US harbors will mean higher prices for all of us at the corner shop, higher prices at the supermarket, higher prices at the electronics store, higher prices for us at the shop, higher prices for us at the restaurant, higher prices for us at the car dealership and beyond. A lot of Caribbean people will think that these things that you are seeing on television news or reading about are far away and they don't impact on me. A lot of people think I'm just a farmer, or I'm just a school teacher, or I'm just a mechanic. They say, I live in St. Lucie in Barbados, or I live in Portmore in Jamaica, or Kingstown in St. Vincent, or Rima in Trinidad, or Basse-Terre in St. Kitts, or San Ignacio in Belize. These problems are far away from me and they don't impact me. That is what you will hear them say. But the reality, my friends, is that if you buy food, if you buy electronics, if you buy clothes, it will impact you. It will impact each of us.
Whew. That right there, that's not just a message, it's a mirror. Because a lot of us feel disconnected from global trade drama. But she's reminding us you don't have to work in trade to be impacted by what's going on. This is showing up at the corner shop, at the supermarket, at the car dealership, at your child's school lunch, there too. And she's not exaggerating. She continues to talk about the impact.
My brothers and sisters, our Caribbean economies are not very large. So we are and have always been at the whims of global prices. If Europe and China and the US and Canada and Mexico are all putting tariffs on each other, that is going to disrupt supply chains. That is going to raise the cost of producing everything from the food you eat, to the clothes on your back, to the phone in your pocket, to the car you drive down the road, to the spare parts that you need for critical infrastructure. That means higher prices for all of us to pay. And sadly, yes, this will impact all of you, regardless of what any of our Caribbean governments will do. We could lower our tariffs to zero in CARICOM, and it will not make a lick of difference because our economies are small and vulnerable.
Let's unpack that. She's acknowledging a hard truth here. Regional policy has limits when your region doesn't control the global supply chain. CARICOM could drop its tariffs tomorrow, remove every trade barrier across the Caribbean, streamline every regulation, and still, nothing changes if the ships bringing in the goods are more expensive, and the economies that fund your tourism industry are in decline. Because this isn't just a price problem. It's a systemic fragility problem. And Mottley wastes no time naming the next domino that's likely to fall: tourism.
This crisis, my friends, will impact not only goods, but it may also have a large spillover effect on tourism. We suggest that the region take steps to sustain the tourism industry, as likely worsening conditions in many of our source markets will have negative impacts on people's ability to travel. We call on our regional private sector and the tourism sector to come together and to work with governments to collaborate for an immediate tourism strategy to ensure that we maintain market share numbers as a region.
That's a warning wrapped in a call to action. Let's be real. Tourism isn't just an industry in the Caribbean. It's the economic lifeline. In places like Jamaica, tourism accounts for 34% of GDP. Barbados, 40% of employment. St. Lucia, Antigua, the Bahamas, upwards of 60 to 70% of foreign exchange earnings. So what happens when middle-class families in the US, UK, and Canada start tightening their belts, canceling vacations, skipping that island getaway because it's just gotten too expensive? Revenue drops. Jobs start to disappear. economies begin to shrink. And again, this isn't hypothetical. We saw it during COVID. We saw it after the 2008 recession. And now a global trade war could choke tourism without ever targeting it directly. So Mottley's solution is exactly what needs to happen. Governments plus the private sector plus regional coordination equals survival.
My friends, I pray that I am wrong. And I'm praying that cooler heads prevail across the world and leaders come together in a new sense of cooperation to look after the poor and the vulnerable people of this world, and to leave space for the middle classes to chart their lives, to allow businesses to be able to get on with what they do and to trade. But truly, I do not have confidence that this will happen.
Ooh, you can feel the weight in her words. That's not just political rhetoric. That's the voice of a leader who's seen this story play out before. She's hopeful, but not naive. Because the truth is, we've been here. Mottley is telling us, don't wait on global leaders to save us. They're not coming. If there's going to be justice, if there's going to be space for the middle class, for the poor, for small states to thrive, it'll have to come from the margins, from the regions, from the Caribbean people. And that's the real prayer. Not for mercy, but for the courage to act without it. And now she turns into actionable steps.
So what must we do? First, we must re-engage urgently, directly, and at the highest possible level with our friends in the United States of America. There is an obvious truth which has to be confronted by both sides. That truth is that these small and micro states of the Caribbean do not in any way or in any sector enjoy a greater degree of financial benefit in the balance of trade than does the United States. In fact, it is because of our small size, our great vulnerability, our limited manufacturing capacity, our inability to distort trade in any way, that successive United States administrations, including and most recently the Reagan administration in the early 1980s, went to great lengths to assist us in promoting our abilities to sell in the United States under the Caribbean Basin Initiative. We will see how these tariffs will impact on that. That spirit of cooperation largely enabled security, social stability, and economic growth on America's third border in the Caribbean, or as we have agreed as recently in our meeting with Secretary of State Rubio, what is now our collective neighborhood.
Now, here's where Mia Mottley shifts from warning to diplomacy, but not the passive kind. She says, we must re-engage urgently and at the highest level with our friends in the United States. And she's saying this not out of weakness, not to beg, but to remind the U.S. of a truth it seems to have forgotten in its quest to level the playing field. The Caribbean was never playing on the same field to begin with. These are small island economies. They don't distort markets. They don't flood the U.S. with exports. They don't threaten American jobs or manufacturing dominance. In fact, the U.S. consistently runs a trade surplus with the region. It sells more to the Caribbean than it buys. And it has for decades. And that's exactly why Mottley invokes the Caribbean Basin Initiative, launched under Ronald Reagan, a Republican president who understood that economic partnership with the Caribbean wasn't charity, it was strategy. It was about securing America's third border, promoting regional stability, reducing migration pressures, and creating markets for American goods, not just managing threats. So when Trump slaps a universal tariff with no carve-outs for historical allies, it doesn't just hurt the Caribbean. It undermines a long-standing policy of mutual benefit.
Secondly, we must not fight among each other for political gain. Because, my dear brothers and sisters, as the old adage goes, united we stand and divided we fall.
Now, that might probably be the most important line in her entire speech. Simple words, but don't let the familiarity fool you. Because in this contest, it's not a cliche, it's a warning. Caribbean nations, like many post-colonial regions, have often fallen into the trap of fragmentation, competing for aid, competing for attention, competing for scraps. And in a moment like this, where the global economy is in flux, supply chains are stressed, and the biggest players are rewriting the rules. Division is a death sentence. Mottley's point is crystal clear. If Caribbean countries go it alone, they won't go far. Because none of these nations on their own have the leverage to negotiate with Washington or withstand the ripple effects of Trump's tariffs. But together, with a coordinated voice, a shared strategy, and unified messaging, they become a bloc, a force, a presence. Does this ring a bell? Africa, I hope you're listening up.
Thirdly, we must redouble our efforts to invest in Caribbean agricultural production and light manufacturing. The 25 by 2025 initiative, ably led by President Ali, seems too modest a target now, given all that we are confronting. We must grow our own and produce our own as much as possible. We can all make the decision to buy healthy foods at the market instead of processed foods at the supermarket.
Let's sit with this for a moment. That's not just a policy recommendation, that's a survival strategy. Because here's the truth. The Caribbean is one of the most import-dependent regions on the planet, especially when it comes to food. And in 2025, that's not just a weakness, it's a risk, a big one. When global prices spike, when cargo routes stall, when tariffs kick in and shipping costs skyrocket, people still need to eat. And if that food has to travel 1,500 miles to reach your plate, you're not just vulnerable, you're at the mercy of decisions made in foreign boardrooms and political offices. So Mottley is saying that has to change, not eventually, now. She references the 25 by 2025 initiative, which is a regional goal to reduce food imports by 25% by the year 2025. But she makes an important point. That target now seems too modest, and she's right. Because the crisis we're facing, economic, environmental, geopolitical, is too deep for gradualism, right? This is the moment to reclaim food sovereignty, not just to survive shocks, but to create jobs, keep money in the region, and build industries that serve local needs first. But it's not just about governments investing in large-scale farms or factories. Mottley brings it home to the people. Buy local instead of processed foods at the supermarkets. That's a reminder that economic transformation isn't only top-down. It's bottom-up too. It's about behavior. It's about culture. It's about choosing local, valuing local, and consuming in a way that strengthens, not just undermines our own economies. And again, this isn't just a Caribbean issue. In Africa, the story hits home. And that brings us to her next point.
Fourthly, we must build our ties with Africa, Central and Latin America, and renew those ties with some of our older partners around the world, in the United Kingdom and Europe, in Canada. We must not rely solely on one or two markets. We need to be able to sell our Caribbean goods to a wider, more stable global market.
Let's pause right there and focus on that first one, Africa. Because this isn't just a feel-good Pan-African idea. It's a strategic, economic imperative. But here's the truth. Despite the shared history, the shared people, the shared struggle, Africa and the Caribbean barely trade with each other. How little? Well, African exports to the Caribbean account for less than 0.1% of Africa's global trade. And Caribbean exports to Africa, just 1.4% of total exports. That's not just low, that's almost non-existent. So why aren't those two regions, which are bound by culture, language, and diasporic roots, doing more business together?
My brothers and sisters, in every global political and economic crisis, there is always an opportunity. If we come together, put any divisions aside, support our small businesses and small producers, we will come out of this stronger. To our hoteliers, our supermarkets, and our people, my message is the same. Buy local and buy regional. I repeat, buy local and buy regional. The products are better, fresher, and more competitive in many instances. If we work together and strengthen our own, we can ride through this crisis. We may have to confront issues of logistics and movement of goods, but we can do that too.
Now we hear buy local all the time. It's on the tote bags and billboards. But in this moment, it's not a slogan, it's a survival tactic. Because when global shipping costs explode, when international suppliers get cut off, when foreign currencies fluctuate out of reach, what's close becomes what's most valuable. And Mottley is saying we can afford to keep outsourcing our survival. We have farmers, fishers, manufacturers, creators right here in the region who are ready to supply our needs. What they need is support. What they need is coordination. What they need is for Caribbean supermarkets to choose them first. And she's not just asking for loyalty. She's arguing value. Because local isn't just patriotic. It can be smarter, cheaper, and healthier. And what's powerful about this moment is that it echoes a growing sentiment around the world, in Africa, in the Pacific, even in parts of Latin America, that economic sovereignty starts in the marketplace. Not with a treaty, not with a UN resolution, but with a choice to back your own, to build your own, to invest in your own. And here she sent a direct message to the US and Trump.
Simply, we're not your enemy. We are your friends. So many people in the Caribbean region have brothers and sisters, aunties, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers, sons and daughters, godchildren, living up in Miami or Queens or Brooklyn or New Jersey, Connecticut, Virginia, wherever. We welcome your people to our shores and give them the holidays and for many of them, the experiences of a lifetime. I say simply to President Trump, our economies are not doing your economy any harm in any way. They are too small to have any negative or distorting impact on your country. So I ask you to consider your decades-long friendship between your country and ours and look to the Caribbean recognizing that the family ties, yes, are strong. Let us talk, I hope, and let us work together to keep prices down for all of our people.
Now let's sit with what I think was the most heartfelt and diplomatically powerful moment of her speech. This isn't a politician trying to negotiate a deal. This is a regional leader reminding the United States of its own reflection. Because the truth is, the relationship between the U.S. and the Caribbean isn't just economic. It's familial. Look at the diaspora. Over 4 million Caribbean immigrants and their descendants are living in the U.S. They fuel American cities, they pay American taxes, they send money back home. And during holidays, during disasters, during pandemics, the Caribbean has always welcomed them home. So when Mottley says, we are not doing your economy any harm, she's not just being diplomatic, she's being factual. Caribbean economies are too small to threaten U.S. industry, are too interconnected to isolate, and too loyal to ignore. That's why these tariffs don't just feel disproportionate, they feel personal. Because when you raise trade barriers against the Caribbean, you're not punishing a geopolitical rival. You're taxing your own neighbors, your own extended family. And Mottley's message to President Trump is both bold and reasonable. She says, let's talk. Let us work together to keep prices down for all our people. That's an invitation to remember what this relationship was built on: trust, history, and human connection. She concludes with a message to the Caribbean people.
My brothers and sisters, there's trouble in our Caribbean waters. But the responsibility each and every day for much of what we do and much of what we grow must be ours. If we take care of each other, if we support each other, if we uplift each other, and if we tap into the strength and innovation of our common Caribbean spirit, we will see this through. Our forefathers faced tribulations far worse than we will ever do. And yes, they came through it.
My God, that hits home. Because that's not just reassurance, that's a reminder of legacy. Because this region, like much of the global South, was born into hardships. It survived colonialism, it endured slavery, It rebuilt after hurricanes, earthquakes, structural adjustments, and systems that were never designed for its success. And yet, it's still here, still building, still dreaming, still standing, still fighting for a fair stake in the global economy. This moment, this trade war, these rising costs, these global headwinds, they're real, they're serious, but they are not new. And if past generations could build nations from the wreckage of empires, then surely, with strategy, unity, and courage, this generation can build power from the cracks in this collapsing system. We don't have to wait for the world to become fair. We can make bold decisions to buy local, to trade regionally, to build ties with Africa, Latin America, and the rest of the global South, to speak with one voice on the world stage and demand to be heard. Because the Caribbean doesn't need pity. It needs partnerships. It needs possibility. To speak with one voice on the world stage and to demand to be heard. And this is a powerful message to the rest of the world, to every nation that feels too small in this moment. So, to my Breakdown family watching across the diaspora, what do you think? Can this moment become a turning point? What will it take to turn shared struggle into shared strength? Let me know in the comments. I'll be reading. That's it for today's Breakdown. And if this episode moved you, share it. Forward it to your WhatsApp groups, your family chats, your group threads. And let's have this conversation together. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, take care. Hey, you! Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.